What we're going to do now is graph and solve absolute value equations. So for our absolute value formula, what we have is y equals a, absolute value of x minus h plus k. The vertex is hk, so what we have to remember is it's the opposite inside and it's the number outside. A represents a slope of our absolute value graph. We're going to have two different types, one where it's going up and one where it's going down. If our a value is positive, it's going to be going up. If our a value is negative, it's going to be going down. We could think of these lines as the slope, so they're going to help us graph it. And based off of those two steps, it's going to be easy to make a V either going up or going down. So for our first one, what we're going to do is we're going to find our vertex. And so the vertex is always the opposite, so that would be 1, and it's the number 2. So we're going to plot the point 1, 2. Now, after we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to use our a value. Our a value is always in front, so in this case, it's going to be 1 over 1. So from this point, I'm going to go up 1 over 1. Now, because it's a V and it's symmetric, that means that the other point is going to be on the opposite side, and that right there is going to give us our absolute value equation. So looking at the second one, we're going to do the same thing. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to find our vertex. It's always the opposite, so that would be -3 and the number, -1. So when we're graphing this, what we're going to do is we're going to plot the, let me get that as black. We're going to plot the -3, -1. Then for our a value, this time our a value is 2 over 1. We're using the number in the front. So we're going to go up 2 to the right 1, and then it's symmetric on the other side. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a V. Then for letter C, we're going to do the same thing. This one right here, notice that there's no number. So then that means that the vertex is going to be 0. And then it would be 0, 3. So we have 0, 3. And then we have the -1/2. So that's our a value. And so from this point, we're going to go down 1 to the right 2. And then what we're going to do is we're going to graph our line. Now, that's graphing. What we're going to do next is we're going to solve. So when we solve this, first we're going to solve for our x-intercepts. Whenever we're solving for our x-intercepts, we plug a 0 in for the y. So we have 0 equals negative absolute value of x minus 2 and then plus 4. Because my absolute value is negative, I'm going to move it to the other side, and I have the absolute value of x minus 2 is equal to 4. Now, as we learned earlier, whenever we have an absolute value, we're going to write two equations, one where the 4 is positive, the other one where the 4 is negative. When we add the two, we get x equals 6, or when we add the 2 over here, we get -2. We can also write it as an ordered pair, 6, 0, and then -2, 0. So those would be our two x-intercepts. Any of those answers are good. Now, in order to find the y-intercept, what we're going to do is we're going to plug a 0 in for the x. So what we have is y equals negative, and then the absolute value of 0 minus 2, and then we have plus 4. 0 minus 2 is 2. 0 minus 2 is -2. Absolute value of -2 is 2, but because there's a negative in the front, -2 plus 4 gives us 2. And we could also write it as an ordered pair if we want. And those would be our two answers. So for the next one, we're going to start off with our x-intercept. So I'm going to plug a 0 in for the y. So I have 0 equals 3, absolute value of x plus 1, and then plus 6. I'm going to subtract the 6. And then after I subtract the 6, what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide it by 3. Now, what I notice here is that my absolute value is negative, and I can't have an absolute value that's negative. So that means that it's no solution, or in this case, no x-intercepts. The reason that there's no x-intercepts is if you go back to what we just did with the graphing, what we have is we have a point at -1 and 6. So we have a point here. Our slope is 3, so it's going to go up. So our graph would be above the x-axis. It's not actually crossing it. That's why there's no x-intercepts. Now with the y-intercept, what we're going to do is we're going to plug a 0 in for the x. So we have y is equal to 3, 0 plus 1, and then plus 6. 0 plus 1 is 1. Absolute value of 1 is 1. Times 3 is 3. Plus 6 is 9. So we have 9, or we could write it as an ordered pair, 0, 9. Now, looking at letter C, we're going to do the same thing. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to find our x-intercepts. So we're plugging a 0 in for the y. So we have 0 equals 2/3, absolute value of x plus 3, then minus 2. I'm going to add the 2. And then I'm going to multiply by 3 on each side and then divide it by 2. So my a value cancels. 3 times 2 is 6. Divided by 2 is 3. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get two answers. One where it's x plus 3 equals 3. The other one where it's x plus 3 equals -3. I subtract the 3 and I get x equals 0. I subtract the 3 and I get -6. Or I could write it as 0, 0 and -6, 0. Now, for the y-intercept, I have y equals, I'm going to take the 2/3, and then I have 0 plus 3, and then the absolute value minus 2. 0 plus 3 is 3, and then 3 times 2 is 6, divided by 3 is 2, and then minus 2 gives us 0. And that would be the ordered pair 0, 0, which we could have guessed because notice that our x-intercept also has a 0. So it would be the same thing. It's on the origin, so it goes through the x and the y-intercept.